Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Ahmad Rijali and I'm from Group 6 and our topic is about words and culture. The exact nature of the relationship between language and culture has fascinated and continues to fascinate people from a wide variety of backgrounds. That there should be some kind of relationship between the sounds, words, syntax of language and the ways in which speakers of that language experience the world and behave, and it seems so obvious as to be a truism. It would appear that the only problem is deciding the nature of the relationship and finding suitable ways to demonstrate it. In this chapter, we will look at various ways in which language and culture have been said to be related. As we will see, some of the resulting claims are unprovable. Others are intriguing, but only one or two are potentially of great interest. A society culture consists of whatever it is one has to know or believe in order to operate in a manner acceptable to its members, and to do so in any role that they accept for any one of themselves. That knowledge is socially acquired. The necessary behaviors are learned and don't come from any kind of genetic endowment. Culture, therefore, is the know-how that a person must possess to get through the tasks of daily living. Only for a few does it require a acknowledgement of some or much music, literature, and the arts. The first topic is wolf. One long-standing claim concerning the relationship between language and culture is that the structure of a language determines the way in which speakers of that language view the world. A somewhat weaker version is that the structure does not determine the word view but is still extremely influential in predisposing speakers of a language toward adopting a particular worldview. This claim has intrigued many anthropologists and linguists, and there is a fairly extensive literature concerning it. The opposite claim would be that the culture of a people finds reflection in the language they employ. A third neutral claim would be that there is little or no relationship between language and culture. The claim that the structure of a language influences how its speakers view the world is today most usually associated with the linguist Sapir and his student Wolf, a chemical engineer by training, a fire prevention engineer by vocation, and a linguist by vocation. However, it can be traced back to others, particularly to Humboldt in the 19th century. Today, the claim is usually referred to as the linguistic relativity hypothesis, Sapir-Whorf hypothesis, or the Whorfian hypothesis. I will use the latter term since the claim seems to owe much more to Whorf than it does to Sapir. Sapir acknowledged the close relationship between language and culture, maintaining that they were inextricably related so that you could not understand or appreciate one without a knowledge of the other. In the Whorfian view, language provides a screen or filter to reality. It determines how speakers perceive and organize the world around them, but both the natural world and the social world. Consequently, the language you speak helps you to from your worldview. It defines your experience for you. You don't use it simply to report that experience. It is not natural but acts as a filter. The most valid conclusion concerning the Whorfian hypothesis is that it is still unproved. It appears to be quite possible to talk about anything in any language provided as a speaker is willing to use some degree of circumlocution. However, some concept may be more codable, that is easier to express in some language than in others. A speaker, of course, will not to be aware of such circumlocution in the absence of familiarity with another language that use a more succinct means of experience. Every natural language not only provides its speakers with a language for talking about every other language, that is, a meta language, but also provides them with an entirely adequate system for making any kinds of observation that they need to make about the world. If such is this, if such is the case, every natural language must be an extremely rich system, one that allows its user to overcome any predisposition that exists and to do this without much difficulty. The second topic is kinship. One interesting way in which people use language in daily living is to refer to various kinds of kin. It is not surprising, therefore, that there is considerable literature of kinship on kinship terminology, describing how people in various parts of the world refer to relatives by blood and marriage. Kinship systems are a universal features of language because kinship is so important in social organization. Some systems are much richer than others, but all make use of such factors as gender, age, generation, blood, and marriage in their organization. You can therefore relate them with considerable confidence to the actual words that people use to describe a particular kin relationship. There might be certain difficulties, of course. You can ask a particular person what he or she calls others who have known relationship to that person. For example, that person father or mother brothers or mother's sister's husband in an attempt to show how individuals employ various terms, but without trying to specify anything concerning the semantic composition of those terms. For example, in English, both your father's father and your mother's father are called grandfather, but that term includes another term, father. You will find too in English that your brother's wife's father can't be referred to directly. Brother's wife's father is a circumlocution rather than the kind of the term that is of interest in kinship terminology.
Alright, so my name is Nurhafisah Oktaviani. Here I want to continue my friend explanation about words and culture. But in this part, I will explain you about taxonomies and color. The first thing is about taxonomies. Okay, the above discussion of kinship terminology shows how basic are certain systems of classification in language and society. Language itself has its own classes of units, vowels and consonants, nouns and verbs, and statements and questions, and so on. People also use language to classify and categorize various aspects of the world in which they live, but they don't always classify things the way scientists do. They often develop systems which we call folk taxonomies rather than scientific classification. So, what is folk taxonomy? A folk taxonomy is a way of classifying a certain part of reality so that it makes some kind of sense to those who have to deal with it. Typically, such taxonomies involve matters like naturally occurring flora and fauna in the environment, but they may also involve other matters too. One of the best known studies of a folk taxonomy is Frank's account of the terms that the Subanon of Mindanao in the southern Philippines used to describe disease. There is a considerable amount of disease among the Subanon and they discuss it at length, particularly disease of the skin. Effective treatment of any disease depends on proper diagnosis, but that itself depends on recognizing the symptoms for what they are. Much effort, therefore, goes into discussing symptoms. Diagnosis is the process of finding the appropriate name for a set of symptoms. Once that name is found, treatment can follow. However, we can see that the success of the treatment depends critically not only on its therapeutic value but on the validity of the system of classification for diseases. That last system is a folk one, not a scientific one. Analysis into taxonomy and components are useful, and in that they help us to organize data in ways that appear to indicate how speakers use their languages to organize the world around them. The analysis show how systematic much of that behavior is, and do so in a rather surprising way. A full taxonomy of disease is something that develops with little or no conscious attention. That it can be shown to have a complex hierarchical structure is therefore a rather surprising finding. That the Palawong pronoun system is also as neat as it is in the way it makes us of its various components is also intriguing. Evidently, language and culture are related very closely, and much of the relationship remains hidden from view to most of us. Only rarely do we get glimpses of it, and even then we may not know quite what to make of our discoveries. Okay, the second things I will explain about color. So, our world is a world of color, but the amount of color varies from place to place and time to time. A January flight from Acapulco, Mexico to Toronto, Canada takes one from a sun-drenched array of colors to a gray darkness. Except to those blinded to it, color is all around, but it is not everywhere treated in the same way. The term people use to describe color give us another means of exploring the relationship between different languages and culture. The color spectrum is a physical continuum showing no breaks at all. Yet we parcel it out in bits and pieces and assign names to the various component parts: green, blue, yellow, red, and so on. We also find that we sometimes cannot directly translate color words from one language to another without introducing subtle changes in meaning. For example, English brown and French brown. An interesting issue is how colors are referred to in different languages. Are color terms arbitrary, or is there a general pattern? If there is a pattern, what are its characteristics and why might it exist? All languages make us of basic color terms. A basic color term must be a single word, for example, blue or yellow, not some combination of words, for example, light blue or pale yellow. Nor must it be the obvious subdivision of some higher order term, as both crimson and scarlet are of red. It must have quiet general use, for example, it must not be applied only to a very narrow range of objects, as for example, blonde is applied in English almost exclusively to the color of hair and wood. Also, the term must not be highly restricted in the sense that it is used by only a specific subset of speakers, such as interior decorators or fashion writers. An attempt has been made to relate the extent of color terminology in specific languages with the level of cultural and technical complexity of the societies in which these languages are spoken. There is some reason to believe that communities that show little technological development employ the fewest color terms. For example, the Jal of New Guinea have words corresponding to dark and light alone. On the other hand, technologically advanced societies have terms corresponding to all 11 mentioned above. Societies in intermediate stages have intermediate numbers. For example, the Tiv of Nigeria have 3 terms, the Garo of Assam and the Hanuno of the Philippines have 4, and the Burmese have 7. One approach to investigating color terminology in languages is predicated on the scientific fact that the color spectrum is an objective reality. It is out there, waiting to be dealt with, and moreover, we know that humans process rods and cones in their retinas specifically dedicated to color perception. Consequently, if you ask speakers of a language to name chips from the Mansell array of color chips, you can access their knowledge of what color means to them. We do know that if speakers of any languages are asked to identify the parts of the spectrum, they find one system of such identification much easier to manipulate than another. They find it difficult to draw a line to separate that part of the spectrum they will call yellow from that part they will call orange, or similarly to separate blue from green. That is, assigning precise borders or marking discontinuities between neighboring colors is neither an easy task for individuals nor one on which groups of individuals are achieve a remarkable consensus. However, they do find it easy, and they do reach a better consensus if they are required to indicate some part of the spectrum. They will call typically orange, typically blue, or typically green. Green. That is, they have consistent and uniform ideas about typical colors. Speakers of different languages exhibit such behavior always provided that the appropriate color terms are in their languages. As we will see in the following section, we can use this idea that people can and do classify in such a way to propose still another approach to relating language and culture. Okay, that's it for my explanation. Thank you.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Nurhafisah. Here I will explain about prototype. Rest purpose an alternative to view that concepts are composed from set of features which necessarily and sufficiently define instead of a concept. He proposed that concepts are best viewed as prototype. A bird is not best defined by reference to set of features that refer to such matter as wings, warm-bloodedness, and egg-laying characteristic, but rather by reference by typical instance, so that a prototypical bird is something more like a robin, that it is like a toucan, penguin, ostrich, or even eagle. Hudson believes that prototype theory has much to offer sociolinguistic. He believes it leads to an easier account of how people learn how to use language, particularly linguistic concepts, from the kind of instance by come across. Prototype theory may even be applied to the social situation in which speech occurs. When people hear a linguistic item, people associate it with how typically seems to use it and what the typical occasion of its use. Prototype theory offers us a possible way of looking not only at how concepts may be formed, but at the cognitive dimension of linguistic behavior, but also at how we achieve our social competence in use of language. The next is taboo. Taboo is a word that prohibition or avoidance in any society of behavior believed to be harmful to its member in that it would cause them anxiety, embarrassment, or shame. It is an extremely strong politeness constraint. Consequently, so far as language is concerned, certain things are not to be said, or certain objects can be referenced not only in certain circumstances. Taboo subjects can vary widely: sex, death, extortion, bodily function, religious matter, and politics. Taboo subject must be avoided or used carefully. Can include your mother-in-law, certain game animal, and use of your left hand. Certain origin of sinister. Crowley described in the Kabana language of Papua New Guinea. People typically have personal names that also refer to everyday objects. So, when you want to refer the actual thing that your in-law is named after, even though you are not using the word as a personal name, you must copy from neighboring languages with the same meaning. For example, the Kabana word from particular kind of fish is urai. So if your in-law is called urai, you must be referred to as moi, the Kabana word for taro. The Kabana word from crocodile is puaya, but you cannot use this word if your mother-in-law is called puaya. You must refer crocodile as bagale, a borrowing from a neighbor language. English also has taboo, and most people who speak English know that these are and observe the rules. The rapture might arouse considerable comment, although not perhaps quite as much today firmly as when show use of bloody in Pygmalion of the use of them in the movie Gone with the Wind, aroused widespread public comment. That's all for me. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.